The cowboy's dog vanished for 2 nights, then returned with an Apache widow begging for shelter. The land stretched for miles in every direction, covered with soft golden grass that swayed in the wind and rugged hills that rose like silent sentinels. The sun would rise slowly over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, and every morning Tom would wake to the sound of birds singing and the gentle rustle of leaves. Life was hard on the frontier, but it was honest, and Tom found comfort in its rhythm. He knew every inch of his land, the streams where the water ran clear, the hidden patches of wildflowers, the small caves that sometimes offered shelter to wandering animals. And through it all, he had one constant companion, a dog named Buck. Buck was not an ordinary dog. He was strong and clever, with sharp brown eyes that seemed to understand everything Tom said, even when words were not spoken. From the moment Tom had found him as a young pup near the edge of the plains, Buck had been more than a pet. He was a friend, a helper, and sometimes the only family Tom had on those long, lonely days. Together, they worked the ranch, patrolling the boundaries, driving the cattle, and keeping watch over the homestead when storms rolled in or strangers appeared on the horizon. The bond between man and dog was quiet but deep. Tom often spoke to Buck as if he were a person, and Buck listened, wagging his tail or nudging Tom with his nose when he sensed trouble or sadness. The mornings on the ranch were usually peaceful. Tom would saddle his horse, Jasper, and ride across the wide fields, checking on the cattle and making sure the fences were strong enough to hold the animals. Buck would trot alongside him, ears perked, always alert, always faithful. Sometimes Tom would stop and let the dog chase rabbits or herd the younger calves, laughing quietly to himself at the dog's cleverness. These moments were simple, but they were precious. The ranch could be lonely, and the bond with Buck made the solitude bearable. One evening, after a long day of work, Tom returned to the cabin, expecting to see Buck waiting at the door as usual. But the dog was not there. At first, Tom thought Buck might have wandered off to explore some new scent in the field. He called the dog's name, his voice echoing across the quiet plains. "Buck, here, boy." He waited, but there was no sound of paws, no familiar bark, no rustle of movement. A feeling of unease began to creep into Tom's chest. Buck never left without letting him know, and never for this long. He searched the fields, climbing hills and walking along the streams, calling for Buck again and again. The wind carried his voice, and he listened carefully for any response, but there was nothing. The sky grew dark and the first stars began to twinkle, but still, there was no sign of his loyal companion. Tom returned to the cabin, worried and restless. He knew that nights on the plains could be dangerous. Wolves sometimes roamed nearby and the weather could change quickly. Without Buck, Tom felt a part of himself was missing. That night, he sat by the fire, listening to the crackling flames and staring at the shadows on the walls. Memories of their life together came rushing back. He remembered the day he had found Buck, shivering and alone, and how he had wrapped him in his coat and taken him home. He remembered teaching him commands, watching him learn, seeing the intelligence in his eyes. Tom had thought of Buck as more than just a dog. He was his partner, his friend, and sometimes, Tom admitted to himself, the closest thing he had to family. The next morning, Tom set out again, determined to find Buck. He rode further than he had ever gone before, crossing valleys and climbing hills, scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. He asked neighbors and ranchers in the nearby settlements if they had seen a stray dog, describing Buck as best he could. But no one had seen him. Days passed and the worry grew heavier with each hour. Tom could not eat properly, could not sleep well, and every sound, every howl of a distant wolf, every rustle in the grass, made his heart leap. Despite the worry, life on the ranch had to continue. The cattle still needed care, the fences still needed mending, and the chores could not wait. Tom worked tirelessly, often stopping to scan the fields, hoping to see Buck bounding toward him with a wagging tail. He remembered the playful way Buck used to chase butterflies, the gentle way he nuzzled Tom when he was tired, and the loyal way he had always guarded the ranch at night. Without Buck, the ranch felt emptier, the wind colder, and the nights longer. On the second night of Buck's absence, a storm began to brew over the hills. Dark clouds rolled across the sky, and the wind howled with a fierce strength that rattled the cabin windows. Tom stayed awake, listening to the sound of rain against the roof, thinking of Buck out there in the wild. He worried about lightning, cold, and predators. He thought of every danger that could face a dog alone, and the fear gnawed at him. He tried to calm himself, telling himself that Buck was clever, that he had survived before, that he would find his way home. Still, the worry would not leave him. On the third day, just as Tom began to lose hope, he spotted movement in the distance. Across the wide field, near the edge of a small grove, he saw a familiar shape. His heart leapt as he realized it was Buck. The dog was running, but not alone. Behind him there was a figure, moving slowly and carefully. Tom squinted, trying to understand what he was seeing. It was a woman, dressed in worn clothes, her face tired and anxious, yet carrying herself with a quiet dignity. Tom's first thought was caution. Life on the frontier was dangerous, and strangers could be trouble. But Buck ran directly toward him, barking joyfully, nudging him as if to say, "She is not a threat, trust her." Tom felt a mix of relief, confusion, and curiosity. He dismounted his horse and approached slowly. The woman did not speak much English, but her eyes were filled with a story of hardship, loss, and survival. She gestured with her hands, showing that she had no home and no family left. Tom's heart went out to her. He saw in her eyes the same resilience he admired in Buck. The dog had brought her here, guided him to her, and in that moment, Tom understood that something extraordinary had happened. Buck had not only returned, but he had brought someone in need, someone who trusted him. Tom led them both back to the cabin, keeping a watchful eye on the surroundings. The woman, who would later introduce herself as Ahiana, seemed both exhausted and grateful. Buck stayed close to her, protective and alert. That night by the fire, Tom watched as the woman warmed herself and drank some water. He began to realize that life on the ranch was about to change. The quiet days he had known would be replaced by something new, something unpredictable, but also full of connection, trust, and the possibility of friendship. Tom could not have known what the future held, but at that moment, he understood the depth of loyalty, courage, and the mysterious ways that life sometimes worked. Buck had been missing for 2 nights, but he had returned with a gift, a chance to make a difference in someone's life, just as the dog had made a difference in Tom's. For the first time in days, Tom felt hope, relief, and a strange excitement. The plains, wide and wild as they were, suddenly felt full of possibility. And though he did not yet know her story, he knew that Ahiana's arrival, guided by his faithful dog, was the beginning of something remarkable. As the fire crackled and the wind whispered outside, Tom sat quietly, feeling Buck's head rest against his leg. He reached down and patted the dog gently, whispering, "Good boy, Buck. You always know what's right." Outside, the night stretched endlessly, but inside the cabin there was warmth, companionship, and the quiet promise of a story waiting to unfold. A story of courage, trust, and the unpredictable ways of life on the frontier. After the first night, with the Apache widow, Tom Lawson began to understand that her arrival was more than a coincidence. Her presence brought a quiet tension and curiosity into his simple life, something he had not felt in years. The woman, who later introduced herself as Ahiana, seemed both wary and grateful. She carried herself with dignity, though her clothing was tattered and her face marked by fatigue. Her dark eyes held stories that words could not fully express. Tom noticed that Buck never left her side. The dog, loyal as ever, seemed to understand that she needed protection, guidance, and care. The next morning, Tom went about his routine with a cautious sense of wonder. He saddled Jasper and rode out to inspect the fences and check the cattle, glancing frequently at the cabin where Ahiana had stayed. She moved quietly, performing small tasks, gathering water from the stream, preparing a simple fire, and arranging the few belongings she carried. Tom observed her from a distance, noticing her careful movements and calm demeanor. Despite the hardships she had clearly endured, she seemed resourceful, managing to make the most of a place she had never called home. Communication between Tom and Ahiana was difficult at first. She spoke very little English, and Tom knew only basic phrases in the Apache language, but both were patient. They learned to communicate through gestures, pointing, and expressions. Tom would show her what needed to be done on the ranch, and she would respond with nods, smiles, or quiet hums. Over time, small routines emerged. She learned to feed the chickens, gather firewood, and even assist with minor repairs. Tom began to see that her intelligence and determination were remarkable. She had survived unimaginable hardships, yet she faced each new task with patience and courage. Buck remained their constant link. The dog would watch for danger, alerting them to movement in the distance or unusual sounds. He would guide Ahiana when she was unsure of the land, sometimes tugging gently at her sleeve or nudging her in the right direction. Tom often marveled at the way Buck seemed to understand both human hearts, as if he carried the wisdom of the plains in his eyes. The dog's loyalty and intuition provided reassurance to both Tom and Ahiana, a silent bridge between two worlds. As the days passed, Ahiana began to share small fragments of her story. She spoke of her village, once vibrant and full of life, now destroyed by violence. Her husband had been killed and many of her family members had perished. She had wandered alone, surviving by gathering plants, hunting small game, and finding shelter wherever possible. Tom listened with quiet respect. Her story was heartbreaking, but it was also a story of resilience. She had endured the impossible and continued to live with courage. Tom felt a growing admiration for her, realizing that her arrival was a chance to help someone in need and to witness strength he had rarely seen. Tom decided to offer her permanent shelter in his cabin, despite the limited space. He cleared a small corner for her, placing a blanket and some simple supplies. Ahiana accepted with quiet gratitude, nodding and lowering her eyes in humility. It was not just survival she sought. She wanted a place to belong, and Tom realized that he could provide that. The cabin, though modest, had warmth from the fireplace and enough room for both of them to live comfortably. Tom felt a sense of responsibility that went beyond kindness. He wanted to ensure her safety, to repay Buck for guiding her to him, and perhaps, in some small way, to give meaning to his own quiet life. Life together slowly began to take shape. Ahiana adjusted to the routines of ranch life, learning to tend the animals, prepare meals, and even assist Tom with the cattle when the work grew demanding. Tom, in turn, taught her basic survival skills for the plains: how to start a fire in the rain, how to recognize edible plants, and how to read the land for signs of animals or danger. Their communication grew stronger, and although they still spoke few words to each other, a sense of understanding developed that transcended language. They learned to anticipate each other's actions, to respect each other's strengths, and to trust one another in ways that words could never fully convey. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and painted the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, Tom watched Ahiana at work by the fire. She was cooking a simple meal of beans and corn, her hands steady and precise. Buck sat nearby, head resting on his paws, occasionally glancing up at her with a gentle gaze. Tom felt a mixture of relief and wonder. Life on the ranch had always been difficult, but with Ahiana here, it felt richer, more meaningful. There was companionship beyond the ordinary, a shared understanding that had grown quietly in the space of a few days. Despite the calm, Tom knew that life on the frontier was never without danger. Bandits, wild animals, and unpredictable weather were constant threats. Ahiana seemed to understand this as well, moving carefully around the ranch and learning to observe her surroundings. She became aware of the ways the land could signal danger, the sudden silence of birds, the tracks of animals near the water, or the shift in the wind before a storm. Tom admired her quick learning and her calm composure. She was no longer just a guest in his home. She was a partner in survival, someone who shared the responsibilities and burdens of life on the frontier. Over the following weeks, Tom began to notice subtle changes in himself as well. He found himself talking more, sharing small stories of his past, and listening to Ahiana's quiet expressions of thought and feeling. There was a sense of comfort in this new companionship, a feeling that he had not experienced in many years. The ranch, once a place of solitude, now carried a warmth that came from human connection. Buck, always faithful, seemed content as well, his tail wagging more often, his eyes brighter. The dog had not only returned to Tom, but had brought someone who would change the course of his life. Evenings were filled with small rituals that strengthened their bond. Tom would repair tools while Ahiana cooked, and they would eat together by the fire. Sometimes Ahiana would hum quiet melodies from her homeland, and Tom would listen in fascination, hearing stories of a world far different from the plains he had known. These moments were simple, yet powerful, reminding them both of the beauty of life amidst hardship. They learned to laugh softly together, to share silent glances, and to take comfort in the small joys that each day brought. One morning, Tom watched Ahiana as she tended to the horses. Her movements were careful and confident, her eyes alert to every sound and motion around her. He realized that she had become part of the ranch, not just a guest or a visitor. She had adapted to the life of the frontier, learning quickly and contributing fully. Tom felt a sense of pride and gratitude. He had offered shelter to someone in need, and in return, he had gained a companion who brought wisdom, strength, and courage to his otherwise quiet life. Buck remained the heart of this new household. The dog's loyalty was unwavering, and he continued to guide, protect, and connect the two humans who had come together through fate. Tom often thought about the mysterious ways life worked, about how a dog could vanish for 2 nights and return with a stranger who would forever change his world. The plains were vast and wild, but within the cabin there was warmth, trust, and a sense of belonging that neither Tom nor Ahiana had expected. As the sun set on the horizon, painting the sky with gold and crimson, Tom sat by the fire and reflected on the days that had passed. Life had shifted in ways he could not have imagined. Ahiana had arrived weary, cautious, and alone, yet she had become an indispensable part of the ranch. Buck, faithful as ever, had guided them to this moment. Tom realized that the quiet life he had once cherished had grown richer, more vibrant, and more meaningful because of the bond they now shared. He felt a renewed sense of purpose, understanding that the plains, though harsh and unforgiving, could also be a place of connection, trust, and unexpected blessings. By the time the night fully descended, the three of them, Tom, Ahiana, and Buck, had settled into a new rhythm. The wind whispered through the trees, the fire crackled softly, and the stars shone brightly in the clear night sky. Tom watched as Ahiana leaned slightly back, exhausted but content, and Buck rested at her feet, protective and calm. In that moment, he knew that life on the ranch would never be the same again. A chapter had ended, and a new one had begun, one filled with companionship, resilience, and the quiet miracles that the frontier sometimes offered. As the days passed on the ranch, Tom Lawson began to notice subtle changes in both Ahiana and himself. Life had always been a rhythm of routine and hard work, but now, with Ahiana by his side, each day seemed fuller, richer, and more purposeful. She had grown more confident in her movements around the cabin and the ranch. Simple tasks that had once been unfamiliar to her now seemed natural. She could gather firewood quickly, feed the chickens without reminders, and even mend small tears in the horses' saddles. Tom watched her with a quiet admiration, recognizing the resilience and intelligence that had allowed her to survive the hardships of her past. Communication between them continued to improve, though it was still a mixture of gestures, facial expressions, and the occasional word or phrase. Tom taught Ahiana a few words at a time, pointing to objects or actions as he spoke, while she responded with a gentle nod or by repeating the word as best she could. Over time, their limited vocabulary became sufficient for daily life, and they discovered that understanding each other did not require perfect language. They learned to trust in their actions, in the shared labor of the ranch, and in the silent understanding that came from living and working side by side. Buck, ever faithful, remained the silent link between them. The dog continued to watch over Ahiana, guiding her to the animals, nudging her toward tasks she might have overlooked, and alerting both of them to any unusual sound or movement. Tom often marveled at the intelligence of the dog, realizing that Buck was not just a companion, but also a teacher and protector. The dog's loyalty and instinct seemed to extend beyond Tom to Ahiana, as if he had accepted her as part of their small household and vowed to ensure her safety. With the arrival of Ahiana, the ranch itself seemed to take on a new energy. Tom and Ahiana worked together in harmony, completing tasks more efficiently than ever before. She learned how to milk the cows, gather eggs, and prepare meals from the simple supplies they had. Tom taught her how to ride a horse with confidence, how to read the wind for signs of weather changes, and how to identify the tracks of animals in the fields. She absorbed every lesson with patience, her dark eyes focused and alert, and Tom began to realize that her presence had not only brought companionship, but also a valuable partnership. One afternoon, Tom noticed that Ahiana was struggling with the cattle. A young calf had wandered off, and she tried to guide it back toward the herd. Tom quickly rode to her side, taking the lead for a moment and then showing her the correct way to herd the animal. She followed his guidance carefully, and after several attempts she succeeded. Tom praised her quietly. "Well done, Ahiana, you're learning fast." She smiled softly, her eyes bright with pride, and Buck barked once as if to echo Tom's approval. That moment, small as it seemed, marked a turning point. Ahiana was no longer simply surviving. She was thriving, adapting to the rhythm and demands of ranch life with grace and courage. Despite their growing bond, the world outside the ranch remained unpredictable and sometimes dangerous. Tom had always known that life on the frontier required vigilance, but now he shared that responsibility with Ahiana. They developed routines for safety, checking the fences for signs of tampering, keeping watch over the cattle, and monitoring the horizon for strangers or predators. Ahiana, once hesitant, learned quickly to notice the signs of danger, the sudden silence of birds, tracks in the dust, or unusual sounds carried by the wind. Tom admired her courage. She had been through unimaginable hardships, yet she faced each new challenge with determination and composure. Evenings on the ranch became a time of quiet connection. After a long day of work, they would gather near the fireplace in the cabin. Tom repaired tools or wrote in his journal, while Ahiana prepared simple meals. Sometimes she hummed quiet melodies from her homeland, melodies that carried a haunting beauty and spoke of a life that had been lost but not forgotten. Tom listened, fascinated, and Buck would sit close, ears perked, as if he too understood the significance of these moments. They were learning each other's rhythms, creating a new family dynamic built on trust, respect, and shared experiences. One evening, as the fire crackled warmly, Ahiana shared a small part of her past. Using gestures, fragments of words, and quiet expressions, she described her village, once full of laughter and life, now gone. She spoke of the people she had loved, of family members lost to violence, and of the long days she had spent surviving alone in the wilderness. Tom listened with deep respect, understanding that her journey had been extraordinary. Her strength amazed him, and he felt a deep sense of responsibility to ensure her safety and well-being. He also realized that life on the ranch was no longer just about survival. It was about building a home, a safe haven, and a shared future. Ahiana, in turn, began to observe Tom more closely. She noticed his quiet routines, the way he worked with patience and care, and the respect he showed for the land and animals. She seemed to understand the rhythm of ranch life intuitively, learning not only the practical skills but also the quiet values that guided Tom's existence: respect for nature, compassion for animals, and loyalty to those who depended on him. Their relationship grew through shared labor, unspoken understanding, and the small acts of kindness and support they offered each other. Tom also noticed that Buck had become a bridge between them. The dog's presence facilitated trust, offering comfort and guidance. Buck would nuzzle Ahiana when she seemed uncertain or frightened, or bark softly to alert her to a task that needed attention. Through Buck, Tom and Ahiana developed a rhythm of teamwork that felt natural and unforced. They began to anticipate each other's needs, learning to act in concert without words. The dog, silent and faithful, had become the heart of their small household, a constant reminder of loyalty, trust, and connection. Life was not without its challenges. Harsh weather could strike suddenly, storms would roll in over the plains, and wild animals sometimes ventured too close to the ranch. Yet through every challenge, Ahiana's courage and resourcefulness shone. She adapted quickly to new circumstances, learning how to protect herself, how to assist Tom in emergencies, and how to make decisions with confidence. Tom watched her with growing admiration, realizing that the woman who had arrived at his cabin weary and wary was now a partner capable of sharing the burdens and responsibilities of frontier life. One day, as they worked together to repair a broken fence, a sudden gust of wind nearly knocked Ahiana off balance. Tom caught her arm, steadying her, and she looked up at him with a mixture of gratitude and determination. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice soft but steady. Tom nodded, smiling. "We've got each other's backs now, always." In that moment he realized the depth of the bond that had formed between them, a bond built on trust, respect, and shared survival. Over time, routines became rituals. Ahiana learned the art of cooking with limited ingredients, preparing meals that were simple but nourishing. She cleaned and organized the cabin, tending to the space with care and pride. Tom continued to teach her survival skills, while also sharing stories of his own life, his experiences, and his hopes for the ranch. Even without a full understanding of each other's language, they communicated in ways that transcended words, through actions, gestures, and shared effort. Their companionship deepened, and the cabin became a place of warmth, safety, and quiet happiness. Buck remained the constant observer and protector. The dog would patrol the boundaries of the ranch, staying alert for any sign of trouble. He would guide Ahiana when she was unsure of where to go or what to do, and he never left her side, even for a moment. Tom often reflected on the mysterious ways life had brought them together. A loyal dog who had vanished for 2 nights, only to return with a stranger who would forever change his life. The plains, vast and unpredictable, seemed less lonely with Ahiana and Buck by his side. Evenings ended with shared quiet moments. Tom would sit by the fire, writing or repairing tools, while Ahiana hummed softly, feeding the chickens or simply watching the flames. Buck rested at their feet, content and alert. There was a sense of peace, a balance that had not existed before. The hardships of the frontier were still present, but the isolation that Tom had once accepted as part of life was replaced with companionship, trust, and mutual respect. Each day brought new challenges, yet also new opportunities for growth, understanding, and connection. By the end of Part 3, the cabin and ranch had transformed. What had once been a solitary existence had become a shared home. Ahiana had adapted to life on the frontier, bringing resilience, courage, and wisdom. Tom had discovered a renewed sense of purpose and companionship. And Buck, ever faithful, continued to guide, protect, and connect them in ways that words could not describe. Together, the three of them faced the vast plains with strength, trust, and a quiet confidence that the future, though uncertain, could be met with courage and hope. Life on the ranch had settled into a quiet rhythm for Tom Lawson, Ahiana, and Buck. The mornings were spent tending cattle, repairing fences, and maintaining the cabin, while evenings were filled with quiet moments by the fire. Yet, Tom knew the frontier was never truly safe. The vast plains, beautiful as they were, held dangers that could appear without warning. Outlaws sometimes roamed, searching for easy targets, and wild animals prowled the hills and forests. Nature itself could be unforgiving, with sudden storms, harsh winds, and unpredictable weather. Tom had learned to expect the unexpected, and now, with Ahiana living alongside him, the responsibility for safety had grown heavier. One afternoon, Tom noticed unusual tracks in the dust near the edge of the ranch. At first, he thought they might belong to a stray animal, but the marks were too deliberate, too organized. He examined them closely, recognizing the signs of human footprints. His heart tightened. He had encountered strangers before, some friendly, some not. These tracks did not feel welcoming. He called Buck over and the dog sniffed the ground, growling softly, alerting Tom that something was amiss. Buck's instincts had never failed, and Tom trusted them completely. He glanced toward Ahiana, who was tending to the chickens, unaware of the danger approaching. Tom quickly moved to guide her to a safer part of the ranch. "Ahiana, come with me," he said, his voice calm but firm. She looked at him with a questioning expression, then followed his lead, trusting him as she always had. Buck ran ahead, alert and ready. Together, they moved to the cabin, taking care to remain unseen from the tracks at the ranch's edge. Tom's mind raced as he considered the possibilities. Outlaws, thieves, or wandering bandits could be approaching. The safety of Ahiana, the ranch, and Buck depended on quick thinking and careful planning. As the sun began to lower in the sky, Tom prepared for the possibility of confrontation. He checked the rifles and ammunition, ensuring everything was ready. Ahiana, observing his movements, seemed nervous but determined. She had learned the routines of the ranch, but this was different. Danger was now tangible, real, and close. Tom taught her simple safety measures: stay low, move quietly, and trust Buck's instincts. The dog, sensing the tension, stayed close to Ahiana, his presence a reassuring shield. Together, the three of them waited, listening to the sounds of the plains and watching the shadows grow longer. Soon, the sound of distant voices reached them. Low, rough voices, speaking in hurried tones. Tom crouched near the cabin window, peering out through the trees. A small group of men was approaching, their intentions unclear but likely hostile. He motioned to Ahiana to stay close, and she obeyed, her dark eyes focused and alert. Buck growled softly, a warning that sharpened the tension. Tom's mind raced with plans. He could not allow the outlaws to enter the ranch unchallenged. The land was his home, Ahiana was under his protection, and Buck would fight alongside him if necessary. They were a small but determined team. The outlaws neared the cabin, their movements cautious but determined. Tom and Ahiana had positioned themselves behind a fence line, using the natural cover of the landscape to stay hidden. Buck, ever vigilant, stayed between them and the approaching men, growling to announce his presence. One of the men spotted movement near the cabin and called out, but the sound was met with silence. Tom realized that courage and calm would be as important as any weapon they had. He whispered instructions to Ahiana, who nodded and held her ground, ready to act if needed. As the outlaws drew closer, one of them reached toward the fence. Buck barked loudly, a sharp and commanding sound that startled the men. The dog's sudden attack was precise, a warning to stay away. Tom seized the moment, stepping forward and confronting the intruders with a firm voice. "This is my land. Leave now or face the consequences." The outlaws hesitated, surprised by the strength and coordination of this small group. A man, a woman, and a dog, all prepared to defend their home. Tom's confidence and presence conveyed that they were not to be underestimated. A tense standoff followed. The outlaws weighed their options, glancing at one another. Tom's heart pounded, but he remained calm, his eyes fixed on the group. Ahiana, though nervous, stood her ground, showing a determination that surprised even Tom. She had learned from him, from Buck, and from the experiences of her past. Together, they were more than the sum of their parts. Buck barked again, a low growl that warned the intruders to think twice. Slowly, the outlaws began to retreat, realizing that this small household was prepared and united. One by one, they disappeared over the horizon, leaving the ranch in peace once again. After the danger passed, Tom and Ahiana assessed the situation. There had been no violence, but the encounter reminded them of the fragility of life on the frontier. They checked the fences, ensured the cattle were safe, and reassured each other that they had done everything possible to protect the ranch. Buck, loyal as ever, received gentle pats and words of praise. He had not only alerted them but had played a vital role in ensuring their safety. The dog's instincts and courage had once again proven invaluable, and Tom could not help but feel gratitude for his companion. That night, as the fire crackled and the stars shone brightly, Tom reflected on the events of the day. The threat of outlaws had been real, but it had also revealed the strength of their partnership. Ahiana, once weary and uncertain, had demonstrated courage and resilience. Buck, as always, had been the steady presence that connected them and guided them through danger. Tom realized that the frontier required more than survival skills. It required trust, unity, and the ability to act quickly and decisively. Together, they had faced the threat and emerged stronger, their bond deeper than ever before. In the days that followed, life on the ranch slowly returned to its rhythm, though Tom and Ahiana remained more vigilant. They reinforced the fences, kept watch for unusual signs, and continued to work side by side. The experience had taught them both valuable lessons about courage, awareness, and reliance on one another. Tom felt a growing respect for Ahiana, recognizing that her strength and intelligence had been crucial in handling the danger. She had become more than a companion. She was a partner, a trusted ally in every sense of the word. Buck, meanwhile, continued to serve as both guardian and guide. The dog's presence reassured them, and his vigilance prevented further surprises. Tom often thought about how life had brought them together in such an extraordinary way. A loyal dog had vanished for 2 nights, only to return with someone in need, a stranger who would ultimately become an essential part of their lives. The experience reminded Tom that the frontier, though wild and dangerous, could also bring unexpected blessings, connections, and moments of courage that strengthened both the heart and spirit. Even in quiet moments, the memory of the confrontation lingered. Tom and Ahiana would sometimes discuss strategies for future safety, sharing observations and ideas on how to protect the ranch more effectively. Ahiana had learned to notice subtle signs in the landscape, from broken branches to distant sounds, and Tom encouraged her to trust her instincts. The dog remained a constant teacher, guiding and protecting, ensuring that their awareness and preparedness stayed sharp. Together, the three of them formed a team that was ready for whatever challenges the frontier might bring. The encounter with the outlaws also brought a sense of accomplishment. They had defended their home without violence, relying on courage, strategy, and the strength of their partnership. Tom realized that true bravery was not just about confrontation. It was about preparation, observation, and unity. Ahiana had proven that she possessed these qualities, and Tom felt a deep sense of respect and admiration for her. He knew that life on the ranch would never be the same, and that their shared experiences had strengthened the bonds of trust, loyalty, and mutual reliance. As the sun set on another day, painting the sky with shades of orange and red, Tom sat quietly by the fire, watching Ahiana and Buck. She hummed softly, a quiet melody that carried a sense of peace and resilience, while Buck lay contentedly at her feet. Tom reflected on the challenges they had faced together, realizing that each obstacle had brought them closer, teaching lessons about courage, trust, and the power of connection. The ranch, once a place of solitude, had become a home filled with purpose, companionship, and a quiet sense of security. By the end of Part 4, the bond between Tom, Ahiana, and Buck had deepened significantly. They had faced danger together, relied on each other's strengths, and emerged stronger. The ranch was no longer just a home. It was a symbol of resilience, trust, and the extraordinary ways that life on the frontier could bring people and animals together. They had learned that survival was about more than skills. It was about courage, loyalty, and the unspoken understanding that binds those who share both danger and life. After the encounter with the outlaws, life on the ranch slowly returned to a steady rhythm. Tom Lawson, Ahiana, and Buck had faced danger together and emerged stronger. The experience had brought them closer, forging bonds that went beyond simple companionship. Tom often reflected on how extraordinary it was that a loyal dog had vanished for 2 nights and returned with someone in need, someone who would become such an important part of his life. Life on the frontier remained unpredictable, but with Ahiana by his side and Buck always vigilant, Tom felt a renewed sense of hope and purpose. The mornings were filled with work, but now the chores carried a deeper sense of meaning. Tom and Ahiana moved through the fields together, feeding cattle, repairing fences, and tending the land. Ahiana had become skilled in tasks that had once seemed impossible to her. She could milk the cows efficiently, collect eggs without missing a single one, and even ride horses confidently. Her strength, courage, and intelligence had grown with each passing day, and Tom admired her more than he had ever expected. Together, they managed the ranch with a rhythm and teamwork that felt natural, almost seamless. Buck, as always, remained the heart of their small household. The dog was alert, loyal, and protective, always making sure that both Tom and Ahiana were safe. He guided them through the fields, patrolled the boundaries, and alerted them to any signs of danger. Tom often thought about how extraordinary Buck was, not just a companion, but a guardian and a bridge that connected him to Ahiana. The bond among the three of them had become unbreakable, built on trust, loyalty, and shared experiences. Buck's presence reminded them that love and loyalty could transcend words, and that sometimes the simplest creatures taught the greatest lessons. Over time, the cabin that had once been a simple shelter became a true home. Ahiana added small touches that brought warmth and comfort: a few flowers near the doorway, neatly stacked firewood, and simple decorations that reflected her heritage. Tom noticed the changes with quiet satisfaction, realizing that the ranch was no longer just a place of survival. It was a home filled with care, belonging, and hope. Each day, they shared meals by the fire, worked together in harmony, and found joy in the simplest moments. Whether it was watching the sunset over the plains or listening to Buck's playful barks as he chased birds or squirrels, their evenings became a time of reflection and connection. Tom would often tell stories of his past life on the ranch, the challenges he had faced, and the lessons he had learned. Ahiana listened attentively, sometimes responding with small words or gestures that expressed understanding. She would share fragments of her own story too, describing the village she had lost, the hardships she had endured, and the quiet strength that had kept her alive. Through these moments, they learned more about each other, building trust, empathy, and a deep understanding that went far beyond language. One calm evening, Tom looked at Ahiana and realized how much she had changed since arriving at the ranch. She was no longer the weary, cautious woman who had sought shelter. She had become confident, capable, and at ease with life on the frontier. Her presence brought balance to the ranch, and her courage reminded Tom that he did not have to face the hardships of the plains alone. Buck, sensing the reflective mood, rested his head on Tom's lap, looking up at both of them with wise, knowing eyes. In that quiet moment, Tom felt a profound sense of gratitude for Buck, for Ahiana, and for the unexpected ways life had brought them together. As seasons passed, the ranch thrived under their care. Crops grew in the fields, the cattle flourished, and the cabin became a place of comfort and safety. Tom and Ahiana worked tirelessly, but the labor was now shared and the burdens lighter. The partnership they had developed extended beyond survival. It became a life built on mutual respect, love, and trust. The challenges of the frontier were still present, but they faced them together, confident in their ability to overcome obstacles, protect each other, and continue building a home. One day, as Tom repaired a fence, he noticed Ahiana helping Buck gather the young calves. She moved with grace and purpose, her eyes bright with determination. Tom felt a sense of pride swell in his chest. He realized that Ahiana had become more than just a companion. She was a partner in every sense of the word. Together, they had learned to navigate the unpredictability of the frontier, relying on each other's strengths and supporting one another through every challenge. Their lives, once solitary and uncertain, had intertwined to create something strong, enduring, and beautiful. Even in quiet moments, Tom reflected on the journey that had brought them together. He remembered the 2 nights when Buck had vanished, the worry that had consumed him, and the relief when the dog returned, not alone, but with Ahiana. That moment had been the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with trust, courage, and shared purpose. Tom often marveled at how life worked in mysterious ways, bringing together those who were meant to meet, protect, and support one another. Buck had been the guide, the connection, and the spark that had changed everything. The bond between Tom and Ahiana grew stronger with each passing day. They learned to anticipate each other's needs, to work in harmony, and to rely on one another for guidance, support, and companionship. Ahiana taught Tom new ways to see the land, to observe subtle signs in nature, and to appreciate the quiet moments of beauty in the plains. Tom, in turn, shared his knowledge of ranch life, survival, and the importance of patience, vigilance, and resilience. Their relationship became a partnership built on mutual respect and shared experiences, strengthened by the challenges they had faced and overcome together. Buck remained a constant presence, the silent guardian who connected their hearts and guided their actions. The dog's loyalty was unwavering, his instincts sharp, and his presence comforting. Tom often watched Buck as he moved through the ranch, protecting the herd, guiding Ahiana, and staying close to both of them. He realized that life on the frontier was not just about survival. It was about connection, trust, and the relationships that gave meaning to each day. Buck had brought Ahiana into his life, and together they had created a home, a family, and a future filled with hope. As the years passed, Tom and Ahiana's life on the ranch flourished. The seasons brought new challenges, from harsh winters to dry summers, but they faced each obstacle with courage, determination, and the knowledge that they were stronger together. Their partnership grew deeper, built on trust, respect, and shared experiences. Buck aged gracefully, remaining loyal and vigilant, a constant reminder of the day their lives had changed forever. The ranch, once a place of solitude and quiet labor, had become a home filled with warmth, care, and the enduring strength of family. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Tom and Ahiana sat together on the porch, watching the sky turn shades of gold and crimson. Buck lay at their feet, content and alert. Tom reflected on the journey they had taken, the hardships, the moments of fear, the courage they had shown, and the bond they had formed. He realized that life on the frontier had given him more than he had ever expected. Not just a loyal companion in Buck, but a true partner in Ahiana, and a life filled with purpose, connection, and hope. Ahiana, in turn, looked at Tom with quiet gratitude. She had found safety, trust, and belonging in a world that had once been filled with loss and hardship. The ranch had become her home, and Tom had become her ally, friend, and partner. Buck had been the bridge that brought them together, guiding them through danger and uncertainty. And now the three of them shared a life that was strong, resilient, and full of love. They understood that the future, though unpredictable, could be met with courage, trust, and unity. In the quiet moments of the evening, they would often speak of small dreams, plans for the future, hopes for the ranch, and the desire to continue building a life together. Tom knew that the bond they shared would endure whatever challenges came their way. He felt gratitude for the lessons they had learned, the dangers they had faced, and the loyalty and courage that had brought them together. Buck, ever faithful, remained at the center of their lives, a living symbol of love, guidance, and the extraordinary ways that life could surprise and transform them. As the night deepened and the stars shone brightly overhead, Tom and Ahiana sat together in quiet reflection. Life on the frontier was still unpredictable, but the hardships had forged strength, courage, and an unbreakable bond. They had learned to rely on each other, to trust in their instincts, and to face every challenge together. The ranch, once a solitary place, was now a home filled with warmth, companionship, and hope. Buck's presence reminded them every day of loyalty, courage, and the remarkable ways that life could bring people together. By the end of Part 5, Tom, Ahiana, and Buck had created a life filled with resilience, love, and trust. The frontier, harsh as it could be, was no longer a place of loneliness or fear. Together, they had built a home, protected each other, and formed a bond that would endure for years to come. The story of the loyal dog, the brave widow, and the steadfast cowboy became one of courage, unity, and the enduring power of trust. Life on the ranch had transformed into a new beginning, proving that even in the harshest landscapes, hope, companionship, and love could flourish.